Hey guys, so I wanted to make this video to talk to you about how to shop for your perfect film camera online. It's not as easy as you would think, but it's also not as difficult or as daunting of a thing as one might expect. So what's cool about shopping for a film camera nowadays is that you have more options online. More and more people are starting to list those film cameras that they maybe inherit or that they found that they just don't use anymore because they know that there's a huge market for it now. What's not so great is that the markup on these cameras can oftentimes just be ridiculous. For example, I bought a Polaroid SX70 camera about 3 years ago off of Etsy for 150 bucks, and I thought, wow, that's kind of expensive. And at the time it was, but then now I look and that same camera is going for like $500, which is just ridiculous. I mean, come on, there's no reason to take advantage of people. But you have to be careful when you're buying online because not only do you have to know that the camera works, you have to make sure that you're getting a good fair deal as well. You're probably not going to get a huge deal online, but you also don't have to get ripped off either. And I'm hoping that this guide helps you to learn the steps to take in order to buy your perfect and ideal film camera off the internet. So to start off with, know what kind of camera you're looking for. Are you looking for a really cheap plastic camera, which I absolutely love those, for maybe some lomography or some fun types of photography? Maybe a 90s style camera that does take a battery and have flash and everything like this one. This one is a really cool camera. It doesn't look like anything too special, and to your average person, it's not, but to someone who's wanting to get into film photography, this is a camera that for probably under like 30 bucks, you could probably get one of these on eBay. It's the Kodak Star Motor. It's one of my favorite cameras. I remember growing up with my parents and my grandparents had this camera, the same exact camera. In fact, I think this is one of theirs that I ended up with somehow. And it's nice because it's got a shutter cover, which means that your lens is not going to get damaged. It also has flash, and it's got a really good clear viewfinder. It's easy to load, and it automatically rewinds your film when you're done, which is a feature that a lot of cameras don't have. So this is a point and shoot camera. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge about cameras to be able to pick one of these up and start taking pictures. Is that the type of camera you're looking for? This is a type of camera that I recommend for your average person starting out. I wouldn't go and spend $200 or $300 on a point and shoot if you're just starting out with film photography. Get something like this, just a really cheap Kodak or something from the 90s that is going to offer a good photo, but is also going to help you learn about like composition and film photography in general. Second option we're going to talk about are SLR cameras. Now, I'm a huge fan of SLR cameras. I love them, but they are heavy and they are oftentimes bulky. This is actually a smaller SLR camera. This is the Pentax P3N, which is my favorite SLR. I also have a Minolta X700. Great camera, a lot heavier than this one with the lens that I have on it, but this is just, you know, just a very basic 50mm lens. I do have a UV filter on here, which is only gonna add a few ounces to the overall weight, but overall, this is a heavy camera and it doesn't even have batteries in it yet. So if you're going to be shooting for a really long period of time, an SLR is going to be something you have to consider the weight of. Now overall, SLRs tend to give you, in my opinion, sharper, more focused, clear pictures. I love the photos that I get with this. And in fact, if I'm doing something where I know I've got a really expensive film to test out, or if I'm going to be taking pictures that are really important photos, you know, of some type of family event or something, portraits even, this is the camera I go with. I don't go with like my Kodak point and shoot. I go with this one. SLRs are also really great for learning how to use film cameras. Now, looking for these on eBay and places like that, you just want to make sure that the lenses, if they're included, are clear. They don't have any fungus or any, and I know that's a weird thing to look for or ask for, but yes, fungus can grow in lenses. You want to make sure that they're clear, they're not foggy, and that's going to be a great place to start. You also want to make sure if the person has used it before, if there are any issues that they know about. What's nice is there are a lot of reputable sellers now on eBay and Etsy and places that do sell vintage and retro cameras. A lot of times they will test these out and do kind of like a rating scale on how good quality they are in terms of like the lenses and things. You also want to make sure that the piece of glass that's in here is not scratched up or foggy or have fungus or anything on it. SLR stands for single lens reflex, and that means that when you look through the viewfinder here, you're actually not looking straight ahead, you're looking at a reflected image from the piece of glass that's inside of here. So you want to just make sure that if they've not already went over those things with you, that you ask about them. You might want to ask if it takes a battery, because this one does take a battery. A lot of SLRs, like the older ones, completely mechanical ones, they might not take a battery. The ones that I've used do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the batteries, you can still get those on eBay and Amazon and places. The next type of camera I want to talk about is the Lomography camera, okay? And lomography is a huge part of the film photography community, whether you love them or hate them. And believe me, there are people on both sides. There doesn't seem to be an in-between. I'm kind of in between. I don't just absolutely love them, but I really don't hate them either, because I have to credit them with getting me back into film photography after growing up with film photography and then just kind of being like, I don't care enough to know about this. Lomography pulled me right back in, and it has become a huge part of my life. The Lomo LCA Plus is what I have right here. Now, something to note about lomography is their cameras are expensive. They're not cheap. Even their disposable type cameras are not cheap. They're as expensive as buying a point and shoot off of eBay from the 90s. Something that I want to make abundantly clear is when you're buying a lomography camera, you're also buying the branding, you're buying the packaging, you're buying into the whole experience of don't think, just shoot, which is, I think, their motto, or something very similar to that, which is just take photos crazy, haphazardly, because you don't have to really worry about composition and things to enjoy it. And to an extent, that's true. That really is a nice way to get into film photography, to just have fun with it. That's the only way, in my opinion, to get into film photography. But the Lomo LCA Plus is one that I spent a lot of money on. In fact, one year, I remember asking for this camera for Christmas. I was getting the response from my parents of, this must be a really good camera for the price. You know, this is like the cost of a good digital camera. And they weren't wrong. But the Lomo LCA Plus is a camera that they market for different reasons. It's not marketed for like your professional photography or anything. But this is one of my favorite cameras because of how fun it is to use. But I was disappointed to find out that the Lomo LCA has a sort of a relative in the film photography world that is not branded with lomography branding, and that you can get way cheaper on eBay. I'm talking about like $70, $80 sometimes for this camera on eBay. And I think I paid like $350 for it, which is a lot. It really is, but I don't regret it because it's brand new, and it's so hard nowadays to find brand new film photography cameras. It does have the support of the lomography community, meaning that there's tons and tons of research and information and photo examples out there. So you have to decide what's important to you. Is it important to buy into that whole community? Which you don't have to buy a lomography camera to be a part of the lomography community. It's absolutely free to be a part of the lomography community. But is it worth it to you to buy a brand new camera, or to buy one that is really good condition for a whole lot less? Now, you're going to probably be buying used cameras in general if you're looking into film cameras and you're getting out of the lomography world, because they're about the only ones making brand new film cameras at the moment. This is me telling all of the camera manufacturers out there to please start making film cameras again. And I know that's a whole other discussion. If you're looking for a film camera on eBay or Etsy, Etsy's a good place to look. And I know that that's one that most people don't think about when they think about film cameras, but Etsy's a good place to look. I will tell you, if you find a camera that you like, stick with it. Don't sell it unless you just don't like it, or you find that you never use it. Because I cannot tell you the times that I've gotten a camera, used it, fell in love with it, sold it because I needed the money, and then decided years later, or even shortly after selling it, that I wanted it back. Obviously, once you've sold it, it's nearly impossible to get your same one back, so you have to go through the process again of looking for that camera, that the one you're buying is a good price, and then paying more than you originally paid, because film cameras are a market that don't seem to be going down. It seems to be going up, and it seems to be going up fairly quickly. So if you're into film photography, or you want to get into film photography, I highly recommend checking out eBay and looking at some of the point and shoot cameras from the 90s. You can get some really good 35mm cameras that are not necessarily like the classics or the ones that everybody is in love with. Like, this is a Ricoh GR1S. It's a good camera, but I've used cameras that were a whole lot cheaper and gotten better results. This camera here, if you're lucky, you'll get it for under $400. If you're not lucky, you're gonna pay a lot more than that for it. And to be quite honest, the only thing that makes it that price range is the demand for it. If there was no demand for this camera, this camera would be a whole lot cheaper, probably like $100, but there's a big demand for it. And the cool thing about film photography is it's not necessarily mainstream still. So if you find a camera you like, get it because you like it, not because it's the cool thing to have. Like I said, I have as much fun shooting with this camera that has, for the record, been in use since the early 90s and still works fantastic and looks amazing in my opinion. I still have just as much fun shooting with this camera as I do shooting with my SLRs and my cameras that cost $400 and $500. Do some research and just find a camera that you like the functions of, the look of, because that is a huge part of it for a lot of people, and the format. I mostly only shoot 35mm film because it's more accessible. You can still buy it, it's still being produced, the film is. You can still have it easily developed. Speaking of which, if you're looking for a photo lab and you're new to film photography, or even if you're not new to film photography and you want a photo lab that's going to give you amazing results for an amazing price, I use oldschoolphotolab.com, have used them for years, and I don't trust anyone else with my photos. I always order processing and scans so that I have the digital version of my photos, and I love it. oldschoolphotolab.com if you're looking for a photo lab. I'll put their link in the description. But my main tips for buying film photography cameras online is to know what type of camera you want, which is a great place to start. The right questions to ask, which are usually if the person's used it or if they can test it out by putting a battery in it to make sure the flash works, if there's any kind of corrosion in the battery compartments, or if there's any kind of like funguses or fog in the lens. That's a great place to start. Those are questions that 90% of the time, if you get good responses back to those questions, you're getting a good deal. You're getting a camera that's going to work and function. Obviously, there are special cases where that's not true, but for the most part, that's what's served me well over the years. And then it's also nice to know if there's a return policy. A lot of times on eBay, they say as is. You never, I don't care how good of a deal it looks, never buy a camera that says as is, because chances are they know something that you don't. The person selling it knows something about that camera to where if you come back a week later after getting it and say this camera doesn't work, I'd like a refund, I'm sorry, you bought it as is. You never want to be in that situation. So never buy a camera as is. Know the right questions to ask, know the type of camera that you want, and that's a really good place to start when looking for a film photography camera. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you love film cameras and film photography and all that amazing stuff, and I'll see you guys later.